Now we're ready to begin. This is very exciting. I'm honored to introduce Sandy Gerber, who's going to be presenting for us this morning about her pilgrimage towards racial justice, a trip she took. She'll tell you all about it. Sandy is the group lead for our anti-racism group here at Mayim Rabim that has been in existence for 2 years. And Sandy's been extremely influential. And she also recently has been appointed to the Tikkun Olam Commission of Reconstructing Judaism. And this is the Reconstructionist, our movement's national body that addresses social justice issues, and we've never had somebody from Mayim Rabim on this, and we're really looking forward to Sandy representing us and also bringing back to us from Reconstructing Judaism. So Sandy will say a lot more about what she does and where she went, and I look forward to this learning with you this morning.
Well, I guess that's not going to go so well, is it? Can people hear me? Can people hear me now? Okay. Just may I ask that you please turn your phones down so we don't get interrupted during the presentation, please? I'd appreciate that. Well, a good Shabbos and Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Welcome to congregants from Mayim Rabim and friends here in the meeting house, and welcome to everyone on Zoom from near and far. I know there are people on Zoom at least from New York, and I'm not sure where else from around the country, but I'm just so thrilled that people are here. And I want to thank Rabbi Stiefel for inviting me to come here today and to talk with you this morning. And I also want to express my appreciation and gratitude to Mayim Rabim's anti-racism group for its stalwart commitment to study and practice during these last 2 years. They've been the base of my support for this work. And I personally just would like to shout out a thank you to Joan Hyman, Robin King Cooper, Bruce Nordstrom Loeb, and Ginny Rovinen. Reckoning Together, a Reconstructionist pilgrimage toward racial justice. From March 16th to 19th, a unique and mind-bending experience unfolded for 200 Reconstructionist Jews from congregations around the country, me among them. A large group of Jews, most unknown to one another, voluntarily stepped into an immersion in some of our country's history, a sordid revelation of racism, persecution, murder, exclusion, but laced with the story of extraordinary resistance in the face of overwhelming odds. In a matter of 4 days, we went to Atlanta, Georgia, Montgomery, Selma, and Birmingham, all in Alabama. In Montgomery, we visited the Legacy Museum of White Supremacy, the Lynching Memorial, and the Rosa Parks Museum, which was an organizing site, which I'll tell you about later. In Selma, we visited the Tabernacle Baptist Church, which was an organizing site for the march from Selma to Montgomery for voting rights. In Birmingham, we viewed the exterior of the infamous 16th Street Baptist Church, where 4 young African-American girls were killed before services started, you might remember, in the mid-60s. And in Atlanta, we visited the renowned Ebenezer Baptist Church, where Martin Luther King's father was the pastor. We traveled on 4 large tour buses with 50 riders in each bus. Each bus had a tour guide employed by the Jewish-owned tour company based in Atlanta called Etgar 36. The guides would convey history lessons while we were traveling that were related to where we were heading each day, along with playing powerful videos related to the purpose of our journey. Rabbis on the buses led us in songs and prayers. The pilgrimage was organized by the national leadership and staff of Reconstructing Judaism, which I'll call RJ from now on, and it's out of our national office near Philadelphia. Rabbis and non-rabbis on the staff played key roles in planning and implementing the pilgrimage, and were particularly attentive to racial dynamics within their own leadership group, as well as to the racial dynamics that were sure to play out among our community of 200. So, among the many tasks facing the leadership, which included the itinerary, the transportation and hotel logistics, the speakers, and the overall program, they focused heavily at the beginning of the journey and in the months prior to setting the tone for the experience. While participants may have had varying reasons for going and brought a multitude of backgrounds, it was essential that we meld into a group that had enough strength, cohesion, and mutual respect to undergo such a journey. So, what was the tone that the leadership committed to forging? It was the creation of sacred and respectful space that honored the essence of the pilgrimage and was up to the task of helping us confront a history of racial terror and resistance to that terror. So, how did we create this sacred space? One of the ways we did this was through singing and deep reflection. So we're going to get a chance to sing what became the hymn or the anthem of the trip. So I'm going to ask my song circle folks here to help me out here, and Joan, can you put the words up, please? There's only 3 lines to this song, and the words are sing, and it's not in your handout. Most of your handouts are just going to be where the words are too small on the screen. So the words are sing through my voice, pray through my hands, let the path be open. Sing through my voice, pray through my hands, let the path be open. Okay, so let's try to read. This starts high, okay, so because it has an interesting range. Okay. Sing through my voice, pray through my hands, let the path be open. Sing through my voice, pray through my hands, let the path be open. Sing through my voice, pray through my hands, let the way be open. One more. Sing through my voice, pray through my hands, let the way be open. Thank you. Another way we created sacredness was to reflect together on the values that guided our group throughout the trip. So here we are going to take turns reading aloud the values of the pilgrimage. So if I'd like someone to start with value, the first one, and then we're going to pass the mic. Bill has the mic right now. And each one read one value, please. Go ahead, Bill.
Betzem Elohim, in the divine image. We recognize the infinite worth of every human being, grounded in the awareness that each of us reflects unique aspects of the divine and carries a spark of holiness within. We treat ourselves with loving respect and seek to treat everyone we encounter with loving respect.
Joan, that needs to go up on the, okay, go ahead. Okay, go ahead. Next.
Ishtadrut, rooted, grounded. We all belong and are valuable leaders in this work. We all have a stake and a rightful place in the important work of racial justice. And we each have different work to do based on our position, for example, social status and identity.
Hesed, loving kindness. We trust our connection to our loving source. We prioritize relationships over judgment or being right. We extend the same overflowing compassion to ourselves as our tradition teaches. Ki le'olam hasdo. God's loving kindness is unending.
Chesed v'achrayut, loving kindness and responsibility. Compassionate accountability. We understand that anti-Semitism and intergenerational trauma have made it harder at times for Jews to be included in or effectively navigate these conversations, which is never discounted nor forgotten. That deserves profound attention and healing. At the same time, these cannot be used as an excuse to ignore that racism still needs to be eradicated, nor overlook the racism that our community is complicit in perpetuating.
Anava, now humility. We strive to take up the right amount of space, not too much or too little. We listen as passionately as we want to be listened to. We note our visceral responses and think before we respond. We stay curious. When in doubt, we ask a question.
Elu ve'elu, both and framework. We live in a complex, multidimensional world that requires adaptive leadership, specifically the ability to understand that multiple priorities and seemingly conflicting truths can exist simultaneously. We need smart, flexible solutions to navigate and properly address them. For example, Jews, like some other groups, can be both targets of oppression and play the role of oppressor, depending on the context.
Tikkun, repair. We believe that striving to repair is sacred work. Through teshuvah, repentance, and relationship building, we take steps to enact repair when necessary. When we or the world are not ready for tikkun, we hold the brokenness with hesed, loving kindness.
Shafira, brokenness, acknowledging and honoring our mistakes and pain points. Racial equity work is often nonlinear, relational, and messy, and involves making mistakes and then correcting and learning from them. We do not let the fear of making mistakes keep us from moving forward. Rather, we consider them growing pains and milestones that are part of the process of striving toward justice and equity.
Hine matov,
my translator. It is good to spend time in affinity space. We celebrate the diversity of the Jewish people by honoring our differences and making time and space to build supportive relationships amongst folks of similar identities and life experiences. We take time apart so that we can come back together in a diverse community with a healthier and more attuned relationship to ourselves.
Naaseh v'nishma, we will do and we will understand. Remain engaged and curious. When the path isn't clear, that can be a sign that you're growing. When something feels hard or impossible, it can be tempting to check out or quit. Get curious instead. Ask questions, stay engaged. The feeling of discomfort is temporary and will dissipate as you learn more and strengthen your skills.
Simcha, joy and fun. As Viktor Frankl beautifully articulated in Man's Search for Meaning, we always have the power to choose how we orient ourselves to any situation with which we are faced. Given the heavy and challenging nature of racism, it is helpful and productive to intentionally incorporate joy and fun into our work so that it's sustainable and keeps our vision focused on a brighter future.
Thank you, everyone, for reading and understanding that we were grounded in these values and they came into play throughout our trip, which I shouldn't use the word trip, we use the word pilgrimage. A third method we used to create sacredness and respect was to discuss a reading by Rabbi Larry Hoffman, Sacred Places and the Pilgrimage of Life, which distinguishes between a trip and a pilgrimage. I'll touch on that later. A fourth way of creating respect was to build cohesion among RJ, Reconstructing Judaism, Jews of color, including rabbis and rabbinical students, as a cohort who would help lead the journey. In October 2022, RJ sent a delegation of 8 to 10 rabbis and rabbinical students of color on this same journey to preview the trip, have time to process their own responses, and build solidarity among themselves without having to respond to white colleagues and participants. They then prepared a video presentation for the 200 of us that was offered as a part of our orientation and participated in a panel to respond to questions and share perspectives. The leadership created a fifth way of heightening the respect and joy and sacredness by developing 2 music playlists with fantastic Black and Jewish music, which I'm going to try to figure out a way to share with you at some point here. So what did we see? In Montgomery, the Legacy Museum, From Enslavement to Mass Incarceration, plunged us into the white supremacy that has permeated our nation, particularly emphasizing one of the foundational pillars of our nation, slavery. Our first step across the museum's threshold took us into a simulated ocean with waves crashing all around us, evoking the slave ship experience. We were then propelled forward into the bottom of a ship with bodies and skulls strewn everywhere. These multimedia exhibits with video, photos, sculptures, posters, charts, and graphs, testimony, moved us from one area to the next, starting with enslavement, to the backlash against Reconstruction, to Jim Crow apartheid, to lynching, to mass incarceration and the prison industrial complex. Tears welled up for me when I found myself in the final suite in front of a large oil painting of George Floyd, confronted by the pain of my own city and my gratitude for Ma'im Rabim's anti-racism group and the support for anti-racism work within the congregation. We next travel to the overwhelmingly powerful lynching memorial in Montgomery. And I'm going to have also here passing the microphone. Joan, can you put up the names, please, of the lynch? No, not that. The other one. The list of names. And I guess I'll say something as long as we're looking at this. Just take a good look at this. And I just want to say that this right here is also at the lynching memorial. And these are, that was a list of 4,400 names on some 800 6-foot-high rectangular steel plaques suspended on steel ropes from the ceiling at the National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery, which is also known as the Lynching Memorial. And we're going to read some names here as soon as we pull them up. I'll say a little more about the plaques that we just saw. Well, let's continue, and I'll get back to that. What I wanted, if somebody could just, who has the mic now? Yeah, could you just read the first one, and then we'll go through and pass it, and each one can read something here?
A Black construction worker was lynched at Camp Blanding, Florida in 1941 for insisting that a white coworker return his shovel.
Reverend T.A. Allen was lynched in Hernando, Mississippi in 1935 for organizing local sharecroppers.
Mary Turner was lynched and her unborn child at Folsom Bridge at the Brooks Lowndes County line in Georgia in 1918 for complaining about the recent lynching of her husband, Hayes Turner.
I might have to get closer. John Stoner was lynched in Doss, Louisiana in 1909 for suing the white man who killed his cow.
Caleb Gadley was lynched in Bowling Green, Kentucky in 1894 for walking behind the wife of his white employer.
Henry Smith, 17, was lynched in Paris, Texas in 1893 before a mob of 10,000 people.
Dozens of black sugarcane workers were lynched in Thurabo, Louisiana in 1887 for striking to protest low wages.
Okay, we're going to go back and look at the plaques for a moment. I call them those hanging steel plaques. The plaques that you saw a minute ago and will hopefully see soon represent every county in the US where a lynching took place, and the suspended plaques simulate hangings. Each plate lists the names of the people who were lynched, overwhelmingly African American, and the dates it happened. On many plates, although the dates were noted, the names were listed as unknown. Some plates included 6 names on the same date in the same county. As a Jew, I couldn't help but have a visceral Holocaust-related reaction to this exhibit. Thinking of the Jews who were hauled out of their homes and ended up in mass graves, names unknown. When we returned to the hotel at the conclusion of the day, during the service that followed, the Friday night Shabbos dinner, on this same day that we did all this in here, Rabbi Sandra Lawson sang a haunting version of a Kaddish to Black Lives, accompanying herself on the guitar, while the packed room sat in hushed silence. So we're going to play you a clip, are we? and we're going to, okay, great. That is Rabbi Sandra Lawson. Well, we're going to all chant the Kaddish for Black Lives. You can stand if you want, but listening to her sing this, yeah, do whatever moves you, whatever moves you. Meanwhile, I guess I would ask you to get ready, because I think we have to pace through this. To look in your packets, there's one sheet that says Kaddish for Black Lives. Yeah, so we're going to do that after we hear this. Oh, how do I do that? Maybe like up here.
There's something else I had to do.
בית קדש שני רבה בימה דירה חירתי דירה lift me up in my time of need. Please show me how to live and love in peace. I want to live in a world that's full of hope, but it's so damn hard when there's so much pain. Violate my day, Be'achon, Uvyom Echon, Uchae Dekol Beit Israel Bagala Uvizman Kareem turn my sorrow, turn my pain, and show me the way. Adonai, we bless your holy name, so that one day there may be peace for us all. Oh, say shalom ben Rama Uya say shalom. Hallelujah, Israel, Vimru, Amen. Shabbat Shalom, and thank you.
I'd like you all to stand now, please. And if you can, whoever can't, of course, please sit. and pull up the Kaddish for Black Lives. You in the room have it in your packets, and I'd like us all to say that together now. And you at home, feel free to do the same. Joan, were you going to put that up? That'll go up in the screen in a minute. Okay. Creator of life, source of compassion, your breath remains the source of our spirit, even as too many of us cry out that we cannot breathe. Lovingly created in your image, the color of our bodies has imperiled our lives. Black lives are commodified yet devalued, imitated but feared, exhibited but not seen. Black lives have been pursued by hatred, abandoned by indifference, and betrayed by complacency. Black lives have been lost to the violence of the vigilante, the cruelty of the marketplace, and the silence of the comfortable. We understand that Black lives are sacred, inherently valuable, and irreplaceable. We know that to oppress the body of the human is to break the heart of the divine. We yearn for the day when the bent will stand straight. We pray that the hearts of our country will soften to the pain endured for centuries. We will do the work to bind up the wounds, to heal the shattered hearts, to break the yoke of oppression. As the beauty of the heavens is revealed to us each day, may each day reveal to us the beauty of our common humanity. Amen. By the Jewish Multicultural Network. Before we left Montgomery, we visited the Rosa Parks Museum, which depicted in great detail the heroism and grit of the Black community in sustaining the Montgomery bus boycott for a year in 1956 in order to obtain basic human and civil rights, in this case on their transportation lifeline, the Montgomery bus service. The ingenuity of the community in sustaining the boycott included such strategies as the development of a homemade taxi service to bring people to and from work, shopping, and appointments. Without this alternative, community members couldn't have survived financially. Like we have a photo of the, yep, okay. And we're also going to discuss the initial demands of the Montgomery bus boycott. So we have a couple of things to look at in a minute. This is right here. I just wanted you to get a little glimmer of what it looked like as a homemade taxi with this was the life-size exhibits at this museum. And that was somebody who was coming to pick people up to get into the homemade taxi and take them to work or wherever they needed to go. Thanks, Joan. And next we're gonna take a look at the initial 3 demands of the bus boycott. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, we had an initial 3 demands, and what I'd like also to pass the mic wherever it may be at the moment, and have somebody please read the first demand, and then there's 3 of them. So go ahead, Ben, read the first one, please.
Clearly delineate the rows that Black passengers will sit in by having Blacks board the bus at the back and filling those rows by moving forward, and whites board the bus in the front and moving backwards.
Go ahead.
This will prevent any white person from demanding that a black person move anywhere at any time according to the whims of the white person's commands.
Thank you. Somebody else can read too, please.
Hire black bus drivers to drive in black neighborhoods, not in all neighborhoods, which includes white neighborhoods.
Require all bus drivers to treat black passengers respectfully,
No, it's not your fault.
in addition to treating white passengers respectfully.
Okay, just for a minute, I wanted to see, does anybody have any response to taking a look at these three initial demands of the bus boycott? Does anything occur to anyone here about these?
It's respectful to everyone.
Anybody else?
Well, compared to what was.
I feel they were asking so little of such a racist society. It blows my mind. I had no idea that their requests were so incredibly minuscule.
Yes. Yeah. I guess maybe that's what hit me as well. That these demands have to be looked at in the context of the vicious racism and persecution. How remarkable it was that they could stand up and ask for anything when we just saw the lynching, the canyon of lynching victims. This is 1956. And to ask for anything, and the way this had to be couched and framed to at least get things started. And the point I want to make is that ultimately the civil rights movement demanded and achieved full desegregation of transit and public accommodations. But I guess I wanted to put in perspective for you to think a little bit about what you may not have thought about before, about really how things went down here. Yes, Ben?
It was also evident in Montgomery in the middle 50s that these demands were made under the canopy of nonviolence. So it was not like if you don't, this will happen. It was merely trying to connect with the emotional and the human construct that all people have, even if they have not been educated properly, talking white people in general, about the humanity of other citizens.
Yes, that's right. And the willingness then in these earlier days to bear the blows of the wrath of the fight of the resistance, and no matter where the demands were at. But I think also, and when you think of the economic persecution and segregation and what people were willing to endure, to forego their transportation for a year in order to achieve this. But then, of course, things flourished and flowered, and we had a Civil Rights Act that brought full desegregation. I mean, to an extent. I mean, legally. So I'm going to move on. So I want to talk about now. So who did we meet on the pilgrimage? So I'm first going to talk about the 90-year-old African-American bishop, Calvin Wood. You'll see him in a moment, who was involved in the civil rights movement in Birmingham and spoke with passion and vigor about his experiences, 90 years old. I was struck by his repeated emphasis on the importance of white solidarity in the movement, that white people were willing to take the ultimate risk and lose their lives along with their Black comrades. I took this message to heart, as I've always had a deep belief that justice movements that should be multiracial, but be led by those who have experienced the severest oppression. There was Joanne Bland, rooted in the modest building of Tabernacle Baptist Church in Selma, which was a key organizing site for the Selma to Montgomery March. Ms. Bland, at the age of 11, walked part of the 54 miles from Selma to Montgomery, inspired by her grandmother, who was raising her and who was immersed in March organizing. Her grandmother was taking care of her because her mother had died from complications of pregnancy. She died because she was refused treatment at the White Hospital in Selma and had to be transported by car to a hospital in Montgomery because she couldn't use the white ambulance. She needed a blood transfusion and wasn't allowed to receive a white person's blood. So they had to find a black blood donor. By the time she received the transfusion from a black donor, it was too late and she died. I'm telling this story to point out the everyday horror of apartheid that goes beyond headline-grabbing issues. There was Billy Planer, the Jewish owner of the tour company, Etgar 36, who was born and raised in Atlanta. He and his tour guides presented a nuanced view regarding Jews in the South and their role in the civil rights movement, which contradicted the often sunny view we hear on this subject. For example, he noted that there are 4 Jews living in Selma today, and there were 300 in the mid-1960s, mostly owners of commercial shops. At the outset of the Selma to Montgomery March in the mid-60s, Selma's Jews were standing on both sides of the Edmund Pettus Bridge. That is, there were Jews who were standing in behalf of the right to vote and Jews who were standing against it. He also noted that some synagogues supported the civil rights movement by allowing civil rights workers to meet in their buildings, and other synagogues didn't allow it. Billy mentioned that there was a fierce struggle in Selma by civil rights supporters against the unjust imprisonment of James Orange, a field secretary for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and the subsequent police shooting of Jimmy Lee Jackson, a farmer and civil rights worker. According to Billy, one of the most virulent racists fighting against the release of James Orange was a Jewish businessman from Selma. Billy also noted that according to the Museum of Southern Life in New Orleans, 25% of Southern Jews owned slaves, the same proportion as non-Jewish whites who owned slaves in the South. But on the other hand, he told us about the horrific lynching of Leo Frank, the Jewish manager of a pencil factory in Marietta, Georgia in 1915. This was the only Jewish lynching in US history, and Mr. Frank was likely wrongfully convicted of sexual assault and murder of a 13-year-old white girl in the factory. Billy also pointed out that a major Jewish synagogue in Atlanta, a 150-year-old revered institution called the Temple, had been very supportive of racial equality since 1946. In 1958, the Temple was bombed. Billy noted that there was a lot of community support that came out for the Temple in the aftermath of the bombing, but he also noted that when Black churches were bombed, there was virtually no community support for them. Billy pointed out that racism isn't a regional Southern issue. He said there are 42 states advocating voter restrictions today, and that Manhattan is the most segregated school district in the United States. So I think that when we consider reparations, it's important to think about how Jewish history in both the North and the South factor into questions concerning repair and restitution. Are there any thoughts or comments, one or two, about what I just talked about regarding the role of Jews during the civil rights struggle? Back there. Wait for the mic. Where's the mic there?
I grew up in Forest Hills, Queens, and the area was, okay, and the area was predominantly Jewish. Many of the Jews were survivors of the Holocaust or their children. And I remember that the city of New York was planning to build some multiracial projects in the neighborhood, and there was a lot of opposition from people who had experienced the most horrific oppression in their own lives, and it seemed to me so blind that they suffered but couldn't identify with the discrimination that was occurring and that they themselves were guilty of.
Thank you. I grew up in the Bronx, New York, and I remember some of what you are talking about also. So yes, I wish we had time to have deep discussion, but we don't. We can pick up on many of these things, I think, as the year goes ahead and as the anti-racism group wants to push forward in our programming. And this is now, okay. And who else did we meet? On the last morning of our journey, there was Pastor and Senator Raphael Warnock and Rabbi Peter Berg, who jointly addressed the congregation at Pastor Warnock's renowned church in Atlanta, Ebenezer Baptist. There's the senator. The rabbi is back in the far corner on the left. They both emphasized the long-standing partnership between both congregations that goes back many decades and that both benefit from. The service, which included Black and Jewish hymns by the Ebenezer Choir, was an uplifting stop on the pilgrimage itinerary. That was our last stop. So, what were the group dynamics like on this multicultural pilgrimage of 200 people, given the care and thought that went into the planning of it? The care that RJ leadership put in at the front end of the journey to ensure that strong Black leadership played a key role and that participants grasped the gravity and reverence that were at the core of the journey paid off when we were confronted with an intra-group conflict on the third day. After a morning that included walking across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, the bridge where so many marchers were viciously attacked and beaten as they set out on the march from Selma to Montgomery, the tour buses then took us to a Reform synagogue in Birmingham, where we were hosted for lunch. As we finished lunch, we were gearing up for the next stop on our journey, the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, where 4 young Black girls were killed in a bombing in 1963 as they were getting ready for services. We were going to hear from a pastor and leader of the civil rights movement in Birmingham about that struggle. But suddenly, several RJ leaders from the People of Color leadership cohort stepped to the podium and quickly became an impromptu panel. The moderator first asked them what they particularly liked and valued about their cultural heritage. After warmly sharing that information with our large group, quietly assembled in the synagogue's social hall, the moderator asked them what's been difficult for them so far during the pilgrimage. Each one spoke of the difficulty of the microaggressions they had endured from white participants and how it was particularly difficult for them to respond in the moment when it happens. Then a young African-American rabbinical student stepped to the microphone and said that he never wanted to be questioned again about the authenticity of his Judaism, how he was a Jew, why he was a Jew, what brought him to become a Jew. He was ferocious in his resistance to this attitude, believing that it was an attack on his personhood, history, and self-definition. If he's part of a Jewish group and identifies as Jewish, then he's Jewish. He and the other 3 members of the panel made it clear that this type of questioning was absolutely out of bounds, as white Ashkenazi Jews are not subjected to this treatment. An African-American woman on the panel affirmed the sentiments of her colleague, noting another point. She said that while she appreciated white participants saying they valued her contributions and insights, they usually added that they were just waiting to hear what her story is. She noted that no one is entitled to her story, just as she's not entitled to anyone else's story. That sharing stories comes from trust, from the heart, and is built on relationship, which takes time and commitment. The panel members all agreed that this is difficult stuff, that it requires a willingness to confront racist attitudes and behaviors, and a willingness to change, that this will cause discomfort, and we have to be willing to be uncomfortable if we're going to be able to change. This confrontation created shockwaves in our group. Not only were we in the midst of a searing confrontation with our nation's white supremacist past and present, but suddenly we were dealing with painful issues right in our own backyard. One of the immediate repercussions from this episode is that a key segment of the afternoon's itinerary, the visit to the 16th Street Baptist Church and a walking tour of the church and grounds with a pastor who was a Birmingham civil rights worker in the 60s and 50s, was dropped. Instead, we left the Reform Synagogue, boarded the buses, drove past the 16th Street Baptist Church, and headed back to Atlanta for our last night together. Needless to say, the buses were filled with hot debate about what had transpired. A number of participants were upset and resistant to the idea that they couldn't feel free to ask about people's backgrounds. They believed that their questions were coming from a curious and friendly place, and they struggled, at least in that moment, to accept or integrate what the people of color leadership had shared. Conversations continued over dinner and into the night. As for me, being someone who likes to grab as much gusto as I possibly can, I struggled with the fact that we had missed a part of our itinerary and wondered why we couldn't have addressed this issue at night when we got back to our hotel. I had to do a lot of processing to understand that this issue had come to a head that afternoon, and that the RJ leadership put the unity and cohesiveness of the group ahead of any single itinerary component. The white leadership cohort of RJ had respected and deferred to the viewpoint of the BIPOC leadership cohort that it was necessary to deal with this issue of intragroup racism head on, then and there. This was an important lesson for me and heightened my respect for our national leadership as well. We're going to go back to Sandra Lawson, who is the inaugural director of Racial Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion you saw her when she played the Kaddish for Black Lives. She wrote an article in the January 17th, 2021 edition of the Jewish newspaper, The Forward. And if you could show a segment of Rabbi Lawson's Forward article, and it's also a handout. So I was just going to ask if we could read maybe if going into it's the last segment on your, the last article there. And I'm just gonna, I'd like to, I'll tell you where I'd like you to just read a little bit. So the title is, I'm a Black rabbi. I've never been in a Jewish space where I wasn't questioned. So I wondered if you could turn the page, for those of you who have the handout. And where is the mic as it travels to and fro? Yeah, okay, could you pass it maybe to somebody? Yeah. And I'd like you to read the second paragraph, following the recent murders. Do we have, okay, good. So if you could scroll down, Joan, to following the recent murders. Yeah. It's the other way, yeah. Okay. Okay, go ahead, Sandra.
Following the recent murders of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor, I see the efforts that many in the Jewish community are making to condemn racism in our society. It is much appreciated, and I'm proud, but we must do the hard work to be anti-racist in our own Jewish communities. Seeing Jews and Judaism through the lens of whiteness allows many in the American Jewish community to be racist and not see racism when it is happening in our own communities. The assumption that Jews are white renders Black Jews invisible, which results in me often not being considered as authentically Jewish or not Jewish at all. Given our recent events, I feel compelled to share some personal thoughts, which I hope will promote empathy, encourage reflection, and invite discussion.
Okay, one more, if you could pass that, and maybe one more paragraph. Or, yeah, go ahead.
I am a Black female rabbi educated about our Jewish tradition through an Ashkenazi, Eastern European normative lens. As a Black American, I have grown accustomed to fighting racism in public spaces. As a Black Jew, I have watched many Jews make false assumptions about who is and who is not Jewish. In other words, from a personal point of view, as a Black Jew, I regularly experience racism in Jewish spaces.
Continue the next couple.
Regrettably, I am not the only one who has had this experience, and other Jews of color can relate to my experiences. In fact, I've never been in a Jewish space where my Jewish identity has not been questioned. I have been asked multiple times upon entering Jewish spaces if I belong. I have repeatedly been asked by strangers, how am I Jewish? When I converted, am I an ordained rabbi? Don't you have to be Jewish to be a rabbi?
Okay, and one more.
This kind of questioning, and some might call it investigation, even if well-intentioned, makes me feel unwelcome. And even if I do not engage or want to reply, I am often prevented from carrying on with my day. I'm bombarded because you, as a white person, need to know details about my life.
And the last sentence.
Questions like these send messages to people of color that we do not belong, and in order to belong, white people need to feel safe.
Okay, so I would encourage everybody to please read this. It's quite profound, and yes, and this is another big topic that we're going to talk about later. We just don't have time to do it right now. So I would like to try and wrap by saying that that our group continued to re-knit itself for the remainder of the journey. The Sunday morning service with Pastor Warnock and Rabbi Berg at Ebenezer Baptist Church was rejuvenating. And at the final assembly of the group, back at the hotel, most of the RJ multiracial leadership team had warm words of appreciation and praise for the entire experience we had been through together, including the struggles and challenges. I'd like to close by referring to an article our group discussed on the first night we came together at the Atlanta Hotel. The article is called Sacred Places in the Pilgrimage of Life by Rabbi Larry Hoffman. He discusses the difference between a pilgrimage and a trip or tour. He says that a pilgrimage requires an attitude of reverence toward the site one visits and to giving oneself over to that place, that pilgrims see themselves mastered by a site's sacredness and carried away by what the site conveys. For me, this journey was a compelling, transformative experience on a number of levels, which I've sought to convey to you this morning. It's an experience not for me to hoard, but to share with community. And a primary community for me is my home congregation, Ma'im Rabim. Ma'im Rabim has given me the space and platform to forge ahead with racial justice work that can hopefully affect not only the congregation, but hopefully the wider community and the wider world. I hope these remarks deepened your awareness of some of the racial past and present in our country. I hope it gave you some things to think about in the coming weeks and months, and hopefully to act upon, which is best done, I believe, in concert with others. I encourage you to support Ma'im Rabim's anti-racism group, to consider joining it, to get behind the reparations work that's going on at the national level of RJ, and to local work going on here in the Twin Cities and in our state. If you're with us right now from other congregations or communities or cities, I hope you're able to connect with meaningful work in this arena. If you're new to our congregation, I hope to see you here again and to continue participating with us. Good Shabbos and Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sandy. We, as you're getting a standing ovation. We're just very thankful for your words and education. We learned so much, and we have so much more to learn. Thank you. And I want